Illyana Rasputin, aka Magik, is part demon queen, a powerful sorceress, sister to a classic X-Men hero, and one of the stars of 2020's The New Mutants. To learn more about this powerful mutant, let's dig into the untold truth of Magik. When it comes to the New Mutants, most of the classic characters come from the 1982 New Mutants original graphic novel or the ongoing series that follows. Magik, on the other hand, first appears way back in 1975's Giant Size X-Men #1. Giant Size X-Men #1 is a game changer. Many of the most popular modern X-Men are introduced to the X franchise in this 1975 comic book, including Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus. When we meet him on a collective farm in Siberia, he's using his powers to save his unnamed little sister from a runaway tractor. Of course, that little girl will grow up to become the Magik we all know and love. But in this particular tale, Illyana Rasputin has little to do with the story once her brother saves her. Of course, a slightly older Illyana would eventually show up in later issues of Uncanny X-Men and get her own miniseries before joining the Junior X-Men in New Mutants. As for her relationship with Colossus, the two don't get a lot of time to hang out. After all, the siblings are on different teams, embarking on different adventures. Nevertheless, Magik and Colossus have crossed paths multiple times, and they've supported each other through thick and thin. In the beginning of 1982's Uncanny X-Men #160, Illyana Rasputin is 6 years old. By the end of the issue, she's 13, and she's survived more than her brother Colossus knows. It all starts back in 1981's Uncanny X-Men #145, when we learn Miss Locke, employee of the eccentric killer-for-hire Arcade, has kidnapped Illyana Rasputin and others to force Colossus and the X-Men to rescue her employer from the tyrant Dr. Doom. After that adventure is over and Illyana is saved, she's allowed to live with her brother in Charles Xavier's Winchester mansion. But when Uncanny X-Men #160 comes along and the X-Men lock horns with demonic Belasco, Illyana is there to suffer the consequences. Belasco captures Illyana and Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, as part of a plot to free himself from the interdimensional realm Limbo. By the end of the story, the X-Men have saved both Kitty and Illyana, but things don't work out super well for poor Illyana. As the team is being teleported away, Belasco grabs Illyana from her brother's arms and yanks her back into Limbo. Back on Earth, Kitty Pryde quickly reaches back through a portal, grabs Illyana, and pulls her to safety. But Peter's sister is 7 years older than she was on the previous page. It won't be until the 1983 miniseries Magik that we see what happened to Illyana in the interim. With the 1983 miniseries Magik, Illyana became the first New Mutant to get her own solo story, which helped explain what happened to her during those missing 7 years we didn't get to see back in Uncanny X-Men #160. The miniseries begins and ends with Illyana safe at Xavier's Winchester mansion, and the story of her time in Limbo unfolds as a flashback. In these scenes, Illyana is pressed into service of Belasco, who hopes to use her as a means to summon powerful elder gods. In the 7 years she remains in Limbo, Illyana learns much from Belasco, as well as alternate reality versions of X-Men, particularly a duplicate of Storm. In the interim, her mutant ability to create teleportation discs manifests, and the sorcerer skills she learns from Belasco grow powerful enough that she's able to defeat the villain. During the miniseries, we also see her first manifestation as the powerful Soul Sword, as well as the first emergence of the Dark Child, her dark, demonic half. Many mutants are defined by their innate powers, but over the years, Illyana Rasputin has proven so gifted with her magical abilities that it can be easy to forget that she even has a mutant power.
Are you crazy? That thing will kill you!
He's right, it's magic! So am I.
Illyana's mutant power is the ability to create teleportation discs which allow her to teleport herself and others over great distances, and even through time. While most often used for practical purposes like getting her friends out of danger quickly, Illyana is not above using her discs as weapons. In 2019's Uncanny X-Men #20, for example, she kills the alternate reality mutant Dark Beast by teleporting him so that his head reappears in a ceiling. But Illyana's magical abilities have often proven impressive enough to outshine her mutant powers. Her soul sword and the mystical armor that manifests with it are extremely powerful on their own, particularly against magical targets, and her Dark Child form is extremely formidable. She's the Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo, the same title Doctor Strange wields in Marvel's Home Dimension, and the Eye of Agamotto identifies her as one possible candidate to replace Doctor Strange as Earth's Sorcerer Supreme in 2009's New Avengers number 53. We've already talked about that time when Illyana Rasputin aged 7 years in a single comic, but that isn't the last time fate plays havoc with Magik's age. In 1989's New Mutants number 73, as part of the line-wide event Inferno, Illyana has her years in Limbo and with the New Mutants taken from her. See, Illyana transforms into her demonic self, the Dark Child, but eventually ascends to what Wolfsbane calls a being of light, or a light child. As a result, Colossus and the New Mutants believe she's dead within her mystical armor until they hear her voice calling for help. Colossus tears the armor open to find her 6-year-old self waiting inside. From that point forward, Illyana remains a child for several years of X-Men stories, until her tragic death in 1993's Uncanny X-Men number 303. A number of rulers in Marvel Comics have double duty as superhero and world leader, and Magik also walks that line. However, Illyana has something of a unique responsibility among Marvel's rulers in that she claims control not over a nation or even a world, but the entire dimension of Limbo. Sometimes. It depends. With the help of her demon Lieutenant Sim, Illyana takes control over Limbo from Belasco, but holding on to Limbo continually proves to be a tricky prospect. When your servants are demons, your servants all want your throne, and throughout her time in the New Mutants, Illyana is forced to fight against the rebellious Sim. In 1988's Uncanny X-Men number 231, she unwittingly summons her brother Colossus, who she believes to be dead, to help her fight Sim and his forces. Then Sim allies with another demon to help defeat Magik in the 1989 line-wide event Inferno, which helps lead to Magik being de-aged to childhood. But even that wasn't the end of the struggle. One of the most recent examples of how tough it is to be a demon queen is in 2013's Uncanny X-Men, when Magik and the X-Men fight off an attempt by the powerful Dormammu and his hordes of mindless ones to take over Limbo. Magik is ultimately forced to, in her words, end Limbo by mystically drawing the dimension into herself and eventually remaking it. You could argue all of us have a so-called dark half, but in the case of Magik, her dark side manifests as a literally separate, destructive being. She's had different names like Dark Soul and Dark Child, but whatever you call it, Illyana's dark self gets closer to the surface the more Illyana uses her magic.
I killed 18 men, one by one.
When she summons her soul sword, for example, usually a magical armor will appear along with it, and the percentage of her body covered by the armor grows steadily as she uses more power. If she wields enough sorcery, she manifests other devil-like physical attributes, like horns sprouting from her forehead and cloven hooves replacing her feet. In spite of its power, the Dark Child often proves to not only be Magik's greatest weakness, but something her enemies can use against her friends. Characters such as the godlike Beyonder and the Asgardian sorceress Enchantress have sometimes managed to force the Dark Child to the surface to use against Magik's allies. And in the case of Enchantress in 1985's New Mutants Special Edition number 1, she physically separated Dark Child from Illyana to remove any and all tempering goodness from the mightier demon half. It isn't until 1984's Magik number 4 that we get to see the very first time Illyana creates her famous Soul Sword as part of a spell she cast to gain vengeance for the death of her friend, the Limbo duplicate of Storm. However, publication-wise, the Soul Sword first appears in 1983's Uncanny X-Men number 171, when Illyana panics as she remembers her experiences in Limbo. Her best friend Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, calms her down, but not before Magik cuts Kitty's cheek. Something that shocks Kitty because she was using her phasing power to become intangible at the time. The Soul Sword has since been a staple of Magik stories, and she's rarely seen in battle without it. The sword boosts her mystic might, and wielding it usually summons a powerful accompanying armor. For the most part, the Soul Sword damages creatures of mystic origin, though non-mystical and even intangible characters have also been affected by the blade. Unlike a more physical weapon like Thor's Mjolnir, Magik carries the weapon within herself. The outward appearance of the Soul Sword is always changing. When it first appears, the Soul Sword doesn't look particularly unique, but in more recent years, the sword has grown in size until its massive girth looks more like what you'd expect Cloud to be swinging in Final Fantasy VII. For close to a decade, the mutant-killing legacy virus rampaged through Marvel's mutant population, and the first hero to succumb to the illness was Illyana Rasputin. Having been reverted to the age of 6 by the end of 1989's New Mutants number 73, Magik is still a little girl when she grows ill. Attempts are made to cure her, but nothing bears fruit. With Jubilee by her bedside, Illyana's life slips away in the emotional story of 1993's Uncanny X-Men number 303. In the wake of her death, Colossus briefly leaves the X-Men and joins forces with Magneto, and the ironclad hero eventually sacrifices himself to eradicate the virus that killed his sister in 2001's Uncanny X-Men number 390. Of course, both Illyana and her brother eventually return to the land of the living because no one really stays dead in superhero comics.
Uncle Ben! Call an ambulance! Someone call an ambulance! Uncle Ben! Oh God, oh my God.
Well, almost no one. Hostilities break out between two of Marvel's most beloved teams in 2012's line-wide event and accompanying miniseries Avengers vs. X-Men. The feud is all over the impending return of the destructive Phoenix Force. In an attempt to stop the entity, the Avengers inadvertently disperse it between 5 mutants: Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Colossus, and Magik, who become known as the Phoenix Five. At first, the Five seem to want to use their new godlike powers only to help the world, but eventually their newfound might corrupts them. Magik and Colossus work hand in hand as part of the Phoenix Five, both before and after they turn their attention to destroying the Avengers. Unsurprisingly, considering her darker leanings, Magik proves just a bit more committed to their course. In Avengers vs. X-Men number 7, she tries but fails to murder Scarlet Witch. 2 issues later, both she and her brother lose their power after beating Spider-Man nearly to death. At first, they begin arguing because Magik is annoyed at her brother's hesitance toward killing Spidey. And that's when Peter Parker uses the opportunity to provoke them both. As a result, Magik and Colossus strike each other, driving the Phoenix Force out of both their bodies in the process. After the event, which eventually includes the death of Professor X at Cyclops' hands, Illyana doesn't seem particularly remorseful over her involvement. She joins Cyclops, Emma Frost, and Magneto in their fugitive team of X-Men. For a long time, the question of Magik's sexuality has been up in the air. She rarely, if ever, has shown interest in romance, leaving some fans to theorize she might be asexual. When Marvel's X-books were revived in 2019, though, it included a revival of New Mutants. And in 2020's New Mutants number 5, Illyana seems to be, like fellow Marvel hero Deadpool, pansexual. As the New Mutants confront the Shi'ar Death Commandos, Magik takes on 3 of them all on her own. But before fighting them, she asks each one of them whether or not they want to make out with her. Whether the scene was mostly comedic or a glimpse at Magik's deeper feelings, it definitely seems that Magik is open to a lot of possibilities. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite superheroes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.